Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new Pokemon TCG video. So today what we're going to be looking at is the new Phantom Forces set of cards that had actually just been released a couple of days ago. First of all, I want to say that for future upcoming sets, as long as I have the scans from any given website, I'll definitely be sure to review them beforehand because I've actually gotten a few private messages from some of you guys asking me to take a look at these and give you my opinion on them. So definitely in the future I'll be sure to look at things beforehand. So I want to apologize that this time I'm actually looking at them relatively late and that the set has actually already been released. But yeah, in the future I'll definitely be sure to review these cards beforehand and I'll give you my opinions. So there definitely are a few other set reviews that have been released from other players. So what I'm going to focus on is just the cards that I think are going to be very good. Essentially like the most hyped about cards and the cards that I think are actually going to be at least somewhat useful to use. Okay, so starting off, we're just going to be taking a look at the Pyroar. So this Pyroar I think is definitely a very nice card to have, and that if you are running a typical Pyroar deck, well, definitely what I would recommend the build to be is a set of 3 of the Flash Fire Pyroars and 1 of these. So the great thing about this guy is that his Flare command turn essentially acts as a Lysander. So by discarding a fire energy attached to this Pokemon, you can switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with his or her active Pokemon. So that's a really cool ability. I definitely think it's going to be useful. Also, given the fact that a lot of people are going to be using a steel Pokemon, I think Pyro decks are definitely going to be on the rise again. Just because a single attack from Pyro, either this one with the Inferno Onrush or the other one which is essentially immune to all EX Pokemon or Stage 1 Pokemon, they're easily going to be repeatedly getting one-hit knockouts regardless of whatever steel Pokemon our opponents are actually using. So I think this is definitely going to be a nice addition to the typical Pyro deck. Another card that I also want to be looking at and that I think has been very much hyped and I think are actually really awesome and cool cards to have is the Manectric EX in combination with the Mega Manectric EX. So Manectric EX on its own is not too powerful, but I mean he does get going relatively easy and on the cheap. So his overrun attack only costs a single energy and it deals 40 damage, which is not bad. I mean 40 damage cumulatively in that 20 damage to our opponent's active Pokemon and 20 damage to one of their bench Pokemon. So it's really not a bad card. His second attack's really not all that bad either, especially if our opponent actually does have some sort of Pokemon tool card attached to it. This attack does 120 damage for 2 energy, so that's really something powerful, and especially if our opponents are running Evitol EX decks, which have been very popular lately. Assault Laser can essentially knock out that Evitol EX with a single attack, and so can Mega Manectric EX's Turbo Bolt attack. So the great thing about Mega Manectric EX and its Turbo Bolt attack is that it does 110 damage, and it allows you to retrieve 2 basic energy cards from your discard pile and attach them to one of our bench Pokemon. So that's extremely powerful, and that can really speed up energy acceleration to our Pokemon, especially if I don't know, you happen to discard them, say by using Ultra Balls or Professor Junipers. This card can definitely help pick those energies right back up and attach them to our Pokemon. So one thing I actually do want to say is that typically Mega Evolution Pokemon haven't really been all that great, and that's because the Mega Evolution rule is that as soon as you Mega Evolve a Pokemon, your turn ends. So that's a huge drawback, and that's essentially why you don't really see a lot of people actually using Mega Evolution Pokemon. But I feel like that's all gonna change with the newest card that's actually been released. Well, 2 of them actually. So they're called Spirit Link cards, and I think that these are gonna be incredibly useful. So the essentially what this does is that by attaching it to our Pokemon, our turn does not end. That's extremely powerful, and that's actually gonna make these EX Pokemon more useful than ever before. Because typically I don't tend to run Mega EX Pokemon, and I occasionally do, but typically the only reason why I do is because they serve as an anti-pyro counter. So these cards are gonna be really awesome to run. So you're not gonna be ending your turn. The one drawback to this, of course, is that this is essentially going to serve as the Pokemon tool card attached to your Mega EX Pokemon. So then you won't be able to say give it, for example, a muscle band or any sort of attachment like that. So that's definitely the main drawback of it. But I definitely think that these cards are going to be incredibly useful. And there's one as well for the Mega Gengar card that's actually just been released. So let's go right back up and continue looking at some cards. So yeah, that's basically my evaluation of Mega Manectric and Manectric EX. One thing I do want to comment on though is that given the fact that Donphan decks have been pretty popular recently, just with the Furious Fist release, and there's just a whole bunch of awesome, awesome fighting Pokemon that have been released. This weakness can definitely impede us, but its resistance is definitely something that you don't want to overlook as well, given the fact that we had a bunch of Steel Pokemon that were just released with this set. So this resistance is definitely going to be incredibly useful. So yeah, so that's essentially my evaluation of Manectric EX in combination with Mega Manectric EX. There's also a full art version of the Manectric EX and a secret rare version of the Mega Manectric EX. I'm not really gonna go over those. I'm more so looking at the functional abilities and essentially how useful a card's actually gonna be. So with that, let's go down the list. And okay, so now I'm going to be taking a look at some of the Night March Pokemon that have actually come out. So one of them is Joltik, another one is Lampent, and another one is Pumpkaboo. So essentially, I mean, these Pokemon aren't necessarily fearsome. They have relatively low HP, but a lot of people have actually already started using Night March decks, which I think is pretty cool because especially say if you're running a Joltik, Night March is only for 2 energies. It does 20 damage times the number of Pokemon that have the Night March attack in our discard pile. So I think that's going to be definitely something awesome just because if you have like several of these guys and then you use them in combination with another of the cards that have actually been released with this set called Battle Compressor, you'll be able to discard these Pokemon into your discard pile relatively early, and you can essentially do a lot of damage for relatively cheap, at least with respects to Joltik. Lampent and Pumpkaboo are somewhat more expensive, but of course, the main drawback to this is that all of these Pokemon have relatively low HP. Okay, so let's go right ahead and minimize these guys again, and let's go down our list. Okay, so some other cards that I actually want to look at are Zubat's not in particularly good, but just because we're going to be looking more so at Golbat and Crobat. So essentially, the cool things about these Pokemon is that when you evolve them, they essentially allow you to put 2 damage counters on our opponent's Pokemon. So I think that's pretty cool. If you want to get a knockout, say, and your opponent decides to retreat one of their Pokemon, I definitely see some cards being used in that you'll just want to be continuously, say, evolving your Golbat and your Crobat. I think that's actually, I definitely have some really cool ideas of how this type of deck can go about. And there's also a de-evolution spray card. I'm actually not sure if it's currently in the standard rotation, but with that card, essentially, it is de-evolves your Pokemon. So say if I had a Crobat on top of the Golbat, I played the de-evolution spray, and then I can evolve him again, like the next turn. That's an additional 30 damage. So definitely something pretty cool to have, and also the fact that these guys run on a single energy can make them flexible and definitely be used in a lot of types of decks. So I think these are some pretty cool cards. I can think of some unique combinations with them, but I don't really see too much competitive play with them. But you know what? I could be wrong. We'll see. People are always creative in terms of creating these new types of decks. So I definitely think these are some pretty cool cards to have. Another of the very hyped Pokemon coming out of this set are the Gengar EX in combination with the Mega Gengar EX. Of course, I've already looked over the Spirit Links, so thankfully the Mega Evolution Rule isn't going to be as detrimental. But with respects to Gengar EX, what's great about him is that his night attack runs on a single energy, and it really doesn't matter what type of energy it is. And then his second attack, Dark Corridor, somewhat energetically expensive, but also with one of the stadium cards that have been released with the set, which I'm going to be reviewing slightly later. Essentially, for 2 energies, you can do 60 damage, and you can switch this Pokemon with one of our bench Pokemon. So this essentially sort of functions as a Donphan, but definitely one of the benefits, and possibly one of the drawbacks to it, is that number one, it's an EX Pokemon, so you don't need to evolve a weaker Pokemon to summon him. But of course, the other drawback to it is that this Pokemon is going to cost 2 prize cards if it's knocked out. But given the fact that Enhanced Hammer is actually returning with this set, I feel like Donphan decks are definitely gonna be decreasing, and I think Gengar EX can definitely be a very feasible card to actually replace it. Just because his Dark Corridor attack essentially does the same thing, and it also poisons our opponent's Pokemon. So definitely, this can be used with a Sigilif deck. So essentially, it's going to take the exact role of Donphan, and it's going to be able to deal out some more damage, and possibly cost us a little bit more in case our Gengar EX does get knocked out. And it definitely doesn't really help that we actually have that we sorry about that we actually have weakness to darkness Pokemon. But his resistance is definitely useful as well, since at the moment a lot of people are actually using fighting Pokemon. But yeah, so that's my sort of analysis of Gengar EX. And Mega Gengar EX I think is definitely a very, very cool card as well, in that its Phantom Gate attack allows us to choose one of our opponent's Pokemon's attack and use it as this attack. So this I think what it means is that you can actually use any of our opponent's Pokemon's attack. So that includes their benched and their active Pokemon. So that's a very, very, very cool card. Definitely if we're running, say, for example, the Mega Gengar EX and our opponent has, I don't know, like a Genesect EX out or something, we can essentially be using those types of powerful attacks. So Mega Gengar EX, definitely a very cool card to have. Once again, the most detrimental things to these types of cards is absolutely their weaknesses and just the fact that Evital EX is running rampant right now. So yeah, so that's essentially my analysis of Gengar EX. Another card that I actually think is pretty cool and that's going to be used in this type of that's actually been released with this set is the Wobbuffet card. So Wobbuffet, what it is that it, like in theory it can definitely be a feasible substitute for Sigilif and say a Donphan deck or a Gengar EX deck, and that as long as this Pokemon is our active Pokemon, it essentially functions as a Garbodor, and that no Pokemon have any abilities except our Psychic Pokemon. So I think that's like pretty cool, but I personally I wouldn't really use this card. I don't see it as being that powerful, and I mean how effective is it to actually nullify our opponent's abilities when this weak Wobbuffet with a very, very weak attack is actually going to be out? So I don't know. Definitely in combination with Dusknoir, I think this can actually be somewhat good, and that we can rearrange damage counters onto our opponent's active Pokemon and then use our Psychic Assault to deal a lot more damage. But yeah, I don't really think I'm gonna use this card all that much, and I don't think it's going to be used in competitive play all that much. But then again, we'll see whether or not I'm actually right. So another card that I want to look at is the Chandler card. So Chandler, it's not particularly a strong card. Its final attack isn't really all that great either. But the one thing that I think is going to be incredibly annoying is going to be its fainting spell ability. So when this Pokemon is knocked out, you can possibly knock out your opponent's attacking Pokemon by flipping a coin. Definitely not a card that I would use, in that you're essentially relying on the flip of a coin. I mean, it can definitely be good in that if our opponent is running their deck mostly being comprised of EX Pokemon, so that you can take two prize cards and they'll only take one. But then again, it relies on a flip of a coin, and that's definitely not something that I would personally want to rely on. So yeah, but just definitely thought I would review them. I still think it's a pretty cool ability, but I don't really see this card as being all that feasible and all that usable. So yeah. So another card that we're actually gonna look at is Gourgeist. I think this card is pretty cool, and that number one Pumpkaboo can definitely be used with its Night March attack. And Gourgeist is sorry about that. And the thing about Gourgeist is that its ability allows it to have 200 HP by actually having a grass energy attached to it. So I feel like some people would definitely want to use this in combination with a Virizion EX, Genesect EX type of deck, because think about it, this guy is only a stage 1 evolution Pokemon and it has 100 HP, but this can easily be turned into 200 HP, so that's definitely something pretty cool. With Virizion and Genesect EX, of course, number one, if you have a Virizion EX, you can speed up the rate of energy attachment to our Gourgeist, and also the fact that he'll essentially be immune to any types of any like poisoning, paralysis, any of those status conditions really, because you'd be running it with a Genesect EX. I mean, that's just one possible combination that I can think of at the top of my head. I mean, there certainly are going to be a lot of different types of combinations that you can use. Say, in case you don't actually want to be running this in combination with a grass deck, or you don't want to be running grass energies, absolutely instead you can use rainbow energies, things like that. But yeah, I have some pretty cool ideas with how to use Gourgeist, and hopefully I'll be releasing some videos for you guys in the future. But again, first I'm going to need to rebuild my collection. But I really do hope I can release some awesome videos for you guys with respects to the new Phantom Forces cards that have been released. So let's go on. So another card that I want to look at is the Malamar EX, which I think is definitely a very cool EX Pokemon that's coming out with the set. Given the fact that Vital EX is used quite a bit right now, I think Malamar EX is absolutely an awesome addition. Also, the fact that Vital EX is going to be countered, I think, by a lot of people running Mega Manectric EX. And at least Malamar EX, the great thing about him is that his weakness is not Thunder, and is instead Rock. So it's always good to have a bit of variability in our weakness. And another thing is that it also has resistance to Psychic. And given that this new set release, I feel like definitely has a certain component of focus on Psychic Pokemon, I think the resistance is also going to be definitely something cool to have. His Maximar attack, I think, is also pretty good. It does rely on coin flipping, which isn't something I enjoy all that much, but definitely his ability, I think, is really unique and cool. And that by attaching an energy into this Pokemon, our opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. So that's cool. You can definitely, if our opponent is unlucky with their flips, it can definitely waste a lot of their time and essentially prevent their Pokemon from doing anything. So definitely a cool card and definitely something that you want to be watching out for. Let's see. So okay, so Bronzong, definitely this card has natural synergy with Dialga EX and Aegislash EX. I mean, it's quite obvious. So essentially, what Bronzong is going to function as is that it's going to use its Metal Link's ability to attach metal energy from our discard pile into some of our bench Pokemon. So given the fact that Aegislash EX and Dialga EX's attacks are pretty expensive to run, this card is definitely going to help speed up the rate of energy attachment, and also the fact that Dialga EX's full metal impact attack forces us to discard 2 metal energy, so Bronzong is going to be able to pick up that energy right back up again and attach them. So I definitely think Bronzong is going to be a very popular card, definitely a very hyped card, and that Steel decks I think haven't really gotten a lot of love, but with this new set release, there's definitely a lot of cool cards and a lot of new Steel Pokemon that I think a lot of people are going to be using. So definitely Aegis/EX with his Mighty Shield attack, in that it prevents all damage done by our opponent's Pokemon that actually have any special energy attached to it. So that's definitely something that's going to come in handy, because the vast majority of decks that you're going to come into, almost every deck actually runs some special energies. So by putting out our Aegis/EX onto the field, we're essentially negating our opponent's Pokemon with special attacks, special energies from actually doing any damage to. So that's definitely very cool. The Alga EX, pretty powerful card. Most likely people are going to be using its Full Metal Impact attack, but also its Chrono Wind attack is pretty powerful in that if our opponent runs, say, a deck that naturally focuses on EX Pokemon, its a Chrono Wind attack will prevent our opponent from actually even attacking us with their EX Pokemon. So that's definitely pretty cool. Definitely think these are some nice cards, but again, I think that one of their biggest drawbacks is that pretty much all Steel Pokemon have weakness to fire, and I feel like this type of deck is pretty much going to be an auto lose versus a Pyro deck, or at the very least, you're going to be losing 9 out of 10 games against a Pyro, unless your opponent has a very poorly built Pyro deck. So that's definitely one of the weaknesses to watch out for. And another thing is that Steel Pokemon in general tend to have a lot of retreat costs. So Dialga EX has 2, our Aegis/EX has 2, or has 3, sorry, and our Bronzong has 3 retreat costs. So that's definitely, I feel like it would be wise to probably run a few Caldeo EX or something, just to have some sort of switch in and switch out with respects to these Steel Pokemon. But yeah, so I definitely think these are some pretty cool cards, and there's natural synergy going on with these 3 Pokemon. Okay, so let's go on, and the card that I'm going to look at next is going to be Florges. And Florges EX, I don't necessarily think it's going to be the greatest card, because first of all, its first attack I think is pretty much completely useless, and I would not want to waste my turn using it, unless, say, I very desperately need a Lysander or something like that. But I think it's a pretty useless card, and the fact that it is an EX Pokemon and would cost us 2 prize cards if this Pokemon is actually knocked out, definitely not an attack you want to use it. Second attack, on the other hand, though, I feel like it can definitely be useful if we are running some sort of a Fairy Aromatisse deck. But because I mean, it only costs us 2 energies, and it's very quick and easy to set up. So I feel like it can be pretty good. So you can essentially do up to 120 damage, and if you also have a Muscle Band attachment, that's 140 damage. So that's pretty powerful for just 2 energies. But again, the attack essentially caps at 140, so that's not too powerful. Okay, so another card that we're gonna be looking at is the Hydraion. Hydraion, personally, I don't like having to rely too much on these third stage evolution Pokemon. I mean, naturally, this is a type of card that you want to be using with a sort of a Yveltal EX type of deck. But yeah, its ability is actually pretty cool. It allows us to attach a dark energy from our discard pile to our active Pokemon, so that's definitely very cool. It can absolutely take the spot of the regular Yveltal, whose attack essentially also acts to retrieve a card from our discard pile and attach them to a Pokemon. Definitely the fact that it's a third stage Pokemon, I mean, it can be a little bit difficult to set up, and how many of these you would want to be running into your type of deck would definitely limit the other number of Pokemon that you can probably run, or you'd have to cut back on some trainer energy cards. So, but I mean, it's definitely a very cool card. It can pay off. I haven't actually had a chance to test him out, so I'm not gonna knock him down before I've actually even used it. But yeah, I think it's definitely a cool card, and its Crazy Headbutt attack is also pretty powerful. But I definitely think the other Hydreigon that allows us to move around our energies is definitely much better than this one. I mean, unless you're really only using this one for its ability, then In some cases, I can definitely see this as trumping the other Hydraion, but yeah, I'm not too sure. I definitely have to test it out before I make a final judgment on it. Okay, so we're also going to be looking at the Goodra. Goodra is, I don't really think it's that powerful, and again, it's a stage 2 evolution Pokemon, but its ability I think can definitely come in handy in that I don't know, I can't really think of any types of decks that would run well with this type of Goodra because I don't know what type of deck really relies on a bunch of tool cards, but again, this card is right here. Its second attack does hit for 130 damage, but it's pretty energetically expensive. I would definitely not use this type of card, and I don't know. People might think of some unique ways to actually use the Slip Trip ability. Okay, so another card that I wanted to take a look at is the AZ card. AZ, I I don't find it to be too useful of a card in that number one, it's a supporter card, so that's essentially the supporter that you're going to be using for your turn. But I think it can actually be pretty useful, especially with say if you're running Dragonite EX and that Dragonite EX's ability allows us to essentially bust in. So I think that's very cool, and also it'll prevent our opponent from knocking out our Pokemon because we're bringing it back to our hand, and yeah, so that's it's pretty cool. But definitely the fact that it's a supporter card does make it somewhat unfeasible, I think. But definitely, I do see this card being very, very useful with some types of decks, and namely, natural synergy that I can think of would be Dragonite EX. So, yeah, definitely a card to watch out for, and it's definitely a card that can take a lot of people by surprise, I think. So, yeah, definitely. I by no means do I think that this is not a good card, but I just think the fact that it actually counts as our supporter may not be the greatest, but definitely a very very cool card, and I probably would be running them in a few decks that I can think off the top of my head, particularly Dragonite EX. Okay, so the Battle Compressor, this is a card that I think is pretty cool in that naturally speaking it works very very well with Night March decks. And that Night March, the more Pokemon that you have with the Night March ability in your discard pile, the stronger our attacks are going to be. So Battle Compressor, it allows us to search our deck for up to 3 cards and discard them. So that's pretty cool. Especially say it can work. This card can work very well with a lot of different types of decks, such as Mega Manectric EX in terms of drawing out our energies from our discard pile. The new Versus Seeker card that has actually been released. Sorry, let me see if I can find that right now. So the Versus Seeker card that has been released. So say if you have the Versus Seeker in our hand, and that we need a Lysander, and we also happen to have a Battle Compressor, so just use that Battle Compressor, discard a Lysander, and then use the Versus Seeker to pick up that Lysander again. So that's pretty cool. So essentially, this card in combination with this card can possibly work as a Skyla for supporter cards. So I think that's definitely very cool. This is a very flexible card that I think can be used with a lot of different decks, and particularly at least with this set, the Night March set. Also, now I'm just gonna be taking a quick look at the Versus Seeker card. So Versus Seeker, it allows us to put a supporter card from our discard pile into our hand. So this card I think is very 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 useful. I can't really think of any card that adding this card in would be detrimental. I think that the vast majority of new decks that I'm going to be building, as soon as I get any copies of Versus Seekers, I'm probably going to be running at least 1 to 2 copies of Versus Seeker in most of the decks that I'm going to be building. So very very useful card because supporter cards are extremely useful, especially if you need that draw support or say a Lysander that you might have discarded. So yeah, Versus Seeker, very very useful, and so is the Battle Compressor if used correctly. Okay, so now I'm going to be taking a look at the Dimension Valley Stadium card. this card works particularly well with, say, Gengar EX, Mega Gengar EX, just really any psychic Pokemon, in that it allows our Pokemon to attack for one less regular energy. So that's pretty cool. It can definitely allow us to power up, say, our Gengar EX with 2 energies as opposed to 3. Very, very flexible, nice stadium card. Yeah, I think it's gonna run well with a lot of psychic Pokemon. And in particular, Mewtwo EX will be able to use his Evil Ball attack for a single energy. So that's very, very powerful. I think this is a very, very cool card. Um, so yeah, another card that I think is essentially a game changer is going to be the Enhanced Hammer card. So this card is going to force a lot of people to rethink their decks, and in particular a deck that I can think of right now that's been extremely, extremely popular at the moment is the Donphan deck. So the vast majority of Donphan decks rely on those strong energies and those double colorless energies. And by running an enhanced hammer, to a great extent, you really nullify those types of decks, because a lot of competitive players tend to not run a lot of special energies. Sorry, they tend to not run a lot of overall energies in their decks. And a Donphan deck, which relies very heavily on special energy, this card single-handedly could almost destroy a Donphan deck. So yeah, this card is very, very useful. I can I can think of a lot of um, decks that can actually use this type of item card. In particular, Verzion Genesect EX decks tend to do very well with the enhanced hammer being used in those types of decks. So definitely I think an overpowered card, but then again a very useful card. It's essentially a reprint. So this card is gonna be nullifying a lot of players' strategies, and I think in particular it pretty much makes, in my opinion, the mystery energy useless. I'm definitely not going to run. I don't think in any of my decks really. I think mystery energy, by the way, would have been very, very useful in if enhanced hammer wasn't released alongside with it, in that it allows us to retreat our psychic Pokemon for essentially by reducing their retreat cost by 2 stars. So that's very, very useful. But now that Enhanced Hammer is out, I just don't think this is a very feasible special energy to run, in that it can be so easily discarded. And yeah, I just don't see it being all that useful anymore. So it's kind of unfortunate, but then again, there's cards like Enhanced Hammers are really, really game changers. Okay, so I've already looked over the Spirit Link cards, so now I'm gonna move on to the Team Flare cards, which essentially Pokemon has never done anything like this before. So it looks like they're buffering right now, but essentially these cards allow you to uh, these are essentially tool cards that affect our opponent's Pokemon. So that's something very, very new and unique, and I'm not really sure why it's not loading right now. But essentially, what Headringer does is that it increases the attacking cost of our opponent's Pokemon by 1 star. So say if our opponent was able to attack for 2 energies, now it's going to force them to make it 3 energies. So I think that's pretty useful in terms of slowing down our opponents. And the jamming net essentially reduces our opponent's attacks by 20 damage. So definitely a card that I can think of that this would go along very well with would be the Seismitoad EX. So finally, it looks like it's come up. Seismitoad EX. So if you attach this to Seismitoad EX, such a Seismitoad EX would be pretty useless, only being able to hit for 10 damage per turn. So that's a huge blow to Seismitoad EX. But I definitely think of the more useful of these cards is going to be the Headringer attachment, and that it's going to force our opponents to have to attach an extra energy for their Pokemon to attack. But the main drawbacks of these cards is that it only works. You can only attach them to our opponent's EX Pokemon. So if our opponent doesn't run any EX Pokemon, immediately these cards are absolutely useless. And the other drawback to them is that our opponent's Pokemon can't have any Pokemon tool cards attached to them, but still, I think these are going to be very useful cards, and definitely in decks that you need to slow down your opponent or you're trying to waste some time, Hydraion or attachment would be great. And jamming net, I definitely feel would be useful as well in terms of essentially making some of our opponent's Pokemon completely useless. Seismitoad EX is one that comes to mind. So yeah, I think these are some very, very cool and unique cards that we can actually run. Okay, so another card that's been extremely, extremely hyped is Lysander's Trump card. Now, I want to say that, in my honest opinion, this card is okay at best. It's not bad. By no means is it bad, and by no means is it great as well. Because number one, the number one like issue that I have with it is that it's a supporter card. So by playing this card, you've essentially taken up your supporter for the turn, and it can be as useful for your opponent as it can be for you, because essentially our both discard piles would be both of your discard piles would essentially be replenished, and your discard piles come back into your deck. So I mean, definitely one of the positive benefits of this is that if you run a Lysander's Trump card, chances are you're probably not gonna get decked out, and I definitely see this card as being useful in some types of decks, and even nullifying some other types of decks, such as a Flareon Vengeance deck, or just the Night March Pokemon that we were looking at earlier in combination with Battle Compressor. This card can essentially make them pretty useless. But then again, the fact that it's a supporter card and takes up our supporter slot definitely makes it somewhat less feasible. But again, I can think of some very, very useful sorts of decks that this card can go into and can exponentially increase their power. So by no means is it a bad card, but it's not exactly a great card either, just because it can also be used to help your opponent. So another card that I want to look at is the Robo Substitute card. Fortunately, it looks like my buffering is slightly slower right now. I also want to be taking a look at the Steel Shelter card. My apologies, guys. Okay, perfect. So it looks like the Steel Shelter card is up. Let's bring up the Robo Substitute as well. Okay, perfect. So the thing with Robo Substitute is that this essentially can function as a Pokemon that, if it's knocked out, it costs you absolutely no prize cards. I think that's pretty cool. Pokemon, at least as far as my knowledge goes, hasn't ever released a type of card like this, so that's pretty cool. I mean, obviously the biggest drawback is that it's a 30 HP Pokemon, so very, very easy to knock out. But then again, it can be very useful in terms of stalling, or if it takes some time to actually set up your type of Pokemon. Definitely a very useful card to have. I can think of some very cool cards and combinations to include the Robo Substitute item card with, and also another one of the cool features that I like about Robo Substitute is that at any time during your turn, you may discard this card from play. So, say if you want to switch it out or anything like that, it doesn't cost you anything. If this happens to be your active Pokemon and your opponent doesn't say they don't want to attack your Robo Substitute for whatever reason, or your bench Pokemon are now ready to attack, you can just discard this card, and then you can bring out your bench Pokemon that's ready and loaded up to attack. So definitely a very cool card to have. Another card that I think is comes in naturally with the synergy of the metal Pokemon that have been released in this Phantom Forces set is the Steel Shelter card. So Steel Shelter, what it does is that our Steel Pokemon essentially can be affected by any special conditions. So that's definitely very cool, I think, in that poisoning, paralysis, all those types of things won't be affecting our Steel Pokemon. So this is essentially natural synergy with the Dialga EX, the Bronzong, and the Aegislash EX that we're actually going to see being released with this set. So definitely a very nice stadium card to have. I think this is actually going to be a stadium card that's going to be used. Yeah, so that's my analysis of these two cards. So let's go right ahead and minimize them. And what other cards do I want to look at? Okay, so I've already discussed the VS Seeker essentially the only cards that I'm going to be discussing next are the Trick Coin and the Zerasic. I think that's how you pronounce it. Zerasic? Yeah, I think Zerasic. I'm gonna stick with that. But essentially, let's go over the Zerasic first, and then let's talk about the Trick Coin. So Zerasic, first of all, I don't really find it to be a very nice supporter card that's released. So essentially, what it does, you can choose a Pokemon tool or special energy card attached to a Pokemon in play. So either yours or your opponent's, and you can discard it. First of all, Enhanced Hammer does the job of discarding special energy cards and only counting as an item card as opposed to a supporter card. So yes, I mean I would much rather be using an Enhanced Hammer, and I have absolutely no idea why you'd want to discard a special energy card attached to one of your own Pokemon in play. I mean the Pokemon tool cards, I think it comes naturally in mind that this card is sort of a counter to the Team Flare cards that are going to be released, and that if you play say a Zerasic and you want to get rid of a jamming net or a head ringer that's attached to one of your Pokemon, this can definitely serve as a substitute for that. But I don't see this as being all that feasible of a card just because it counts as a supporter card. But yeah, definitely I'm not all hyped up about this card, but I just thought I'd go over it with you guys regardless. And the other card that I want to be looking at, and the last card that I'm actually going to be looking at in this set, is going to be the Trick Coin card. So essentially what it does is that once during your turn, after you flip any coins for an attack of the Pokemon discard, is that you may ignore all those flips and essentially flip all over again. So I mean, personally, I think that this card is naturally made to have synergy with the Malamar EX card that's been released. But then again, I mean, if you do flip, say Malamar EX, for example, has 4 energies attached to it, and you happen to get 2 heads, but you're not really satisfied with that, so you're gonna use Trick Coin and flip all over again. I mean, your second time around, when you're flipping to actually attack our opponent's Pokemon, it may be worse. So I don't know, but I mean, definitely I can see it coming in handy in decks that rely on flipping cards, so such as, for example, Mega Kangaskhan EX, a Pokemon, just any general Pokemon that needs flip cards. So definitely a few Pokemon come to mind, but I don't know. It's sort of like a card that can actually end up being worse if you do choose to reflip. But especially like say with Pokemon such as Malamar EX, in which you flip multiple coins. If it's just a Pokemon that requires a single flip, then Trick Coin can absolutely be very useful. But I personally much rather use the Victini with the Victory Star attack, and that it essentially is a Trick Coin every single turn, and also the fact that Trick Coin is an item card, and say if our opponent has a Seismitoad EX or a Trevenant, then essentially this card is going to be absolutely useless. So I'd much rather have the Victini, personally speaking. But I just thought I'd go over this card again, although I don't personally find it to be too useful of a card. Okay, so with that, I think I've pretty much reviewed all of the cards that I think are going to be useful. Essentially, these are just the full art versions, and essentially the super rare versions of cards that I've already pretty much reviewed. So yeah, I think that's it. That's going to be my set review for the Phantom Forces cards. I'm going to put the link where you guys can actually take a look at the scanned Phantom Forces set yourselves. And for future sets that are going to come out, I'm definitely going to try to review them beforehand. So my apologies that I'm actually reviewing them now that they've already been released. But yeah, so this is essentially my take on this. If you guys did find this video useful and you enjoyed it, please do hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll definitely be releasing a couple more videos this week. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.